All right, well, this video is on how to use efofex embedded in Word in order to create graphs and diagrams. And so I find this really useful. And so one of the things that I like is I'm not toggling between different platforms like CUDA or something else in order to create diagrams and graphs. So I like to stay within the same platform, but certainly there's other ways. efofex is something that our department has purchased a school-wide subscription for. You can put it on Word on your laptop, on your computer at home. Don't do work at home, but you can put it on unlimited computers. All right, I've already installed it. If you've not installed it, you would need to do that first. But I'm just going to click this tab that says efofex Classic. I like to use these buttons rather than the inline ones. The inline ones, it's harder to then move the diagrams around, so I like to use these. I'm going to start with creating a graph on a coordinate system. And so I'm going to click on the efofex graph, and things are a little slower because I've got the video going, which takes some of the computer resources. It doesn't normally take quite this long. Now I've got my grid and everything set up in a way that I like it. Not everybody likes the same format for the grids, and so I'll show you how to change those settings in a minute. But to start off, if you want to enter an equation, you can just hit y equals. Now, they don't actually have to just be y equals equations. You can do relations and non-functions like vertical lines. In fact, maybe I'll start there. I'll do x equals 3. If I then hit OK, you can see that line. Now, maybe you don't want it to be that color. So I could go back to y equals, and if I click right here, this little paint, I could say, oh, I want all of these to be blue. There it is. You can put more than one on the same equation. Now, if you don't type y equals or on the same graph, you don't have to actually type y equals. I usually do just because, I don't know, I guess it's just habit. So let's say I wanted something like this, y equals -2, and maybe I want it to have certain x-intercepts. And so I can put this in any form. It doesn't have to be an expanded form. And I'm looking at this, and maybe I want to be able to more easily see the full parabola. You can see it's off my graph a little bit. So maybe I'll change my value of a. All right, so I kind of like that one. Now there are some nice things that I could do with this graph if I wanted to. I could, if I wanted to like really have students focus in on a certain point, I could click this button right here. And I could place a point directly on the graph. I'm doing great at it. I'm not really sure why I'm having a hard time doing that. There we go. So maybe I want to look at that point, or maybe I then want to take this point and move it. Trying to get that on that exact. I'm going to delete that point and do it again. I don't know why it didn't work earlier, but I'm going to place it right here at the point of intersection. And it's mad at me. And then I'll try again on the whole dragging thing. And I just made another point by accident, which I didn't want to do, so I'll just click on it and delete. Now you can also name those points if you want. You can ask it to keep that point there and to keep that name. I'm going to delete that point. Let's see, where's the point of intersections actually there? Okay, there we go. I just needed to hover over it. Now I could keep this title if I wanted, or if I click on that box and then hit delete, that title will go away if I don't want that there. If I wanted to list the x-intercepts, I could click, and then I could click on this box to move it. So that could be really nice if I'm trying to maybe make a diagram used for teaching tools. Not that I have to. I don't have to keep those things on there. I can just click on them and delete. And one of the nice things too is you can also do inequalities. Let's say I wanted this to be x is less than 3. I could do that, and you can see the shading is on here already for me, which is really nice. If I want the shading to be a different color, I could pick a different color for the shading. That's probably too light, but you kind of get the idea that you could pick and say, okay, I would like this to look a little bit different. Now, obviously, on the notes, when we're displaying things, you could see these colors better. If I then wanted to do shading, and maybe I wanted, I wanted to point out, did you see how the line became dotted? based on what I chose. Let's say I wanted this one to also be an equality, and maybe I want this one to be greater than or equal to. I could just put in the greater than symbol and the equal to symbol, and it'll select both. Maybe I want this one to be shaded in a different color. Oh, they just shaded the entire solution. You could pick and say whether you only want the feasible region or whether you want the whole half planes. Actually, that's weird. That does the opposite ones. I don't want that. Okay, so this will do the region for the entire system, which is pretty nice. So you can see how that could be a little bit helpful. I think there is a way to do the intersection of both, but I probably have a setting in here that I've got. All right, let's talk about the settings here. Under the axes, I've made the axes really just a larger font. I think the default is like 1 point or something like that. If I use that, you can see that the axes are harder to see, which is why I chose to make them usually a little bit. I think I use 2.5. And you can also change if you don't want them to be solid. You can change the color of the axes, etc. The scales, I chose to use these windows, but you could change the windows. Now, I did not do the minor axes, which you can do as a different color. If you click that, you can see they've added in all of these like little intermediate ones. I think it makes the graph look really cluttered, so I usually do not use those. And I just have them going on every one unit. You can choose if you want on the axes for them to show the scale or tick marks. Here's what the scale would look like. Didn't show up. I must have something set different on under scales. Let me show the tick marks. Like that, if you want to kind of see those a little bit better. Let me go under scale here, or grid. The grid, you can kind of decide if you want to show the grid or not. You can show the grid as like dotted ones. That's so confusing. I don't love that. You can change the colors on the grid. If you want like them to be darker or lighter, you could change that right in here by clicking on this. Like if I really wanted the grid to be really light, I could do that. It does require a couple clicks in order to do that. But if I wanted to lighten up that grid, I will say it doesn't copy very well when it's that light. I usually don't go lower than the one I already had. But you can see it's lighter then, and maybe that's easier for students to draw on. You could also choose to not show the grid at all, and then you just have the axes. And you could, again, choose whether or not you want the scale. Sometimes it's nice to not show those tick marks, because if you really were graphing something where you didn't really want them to know the scale, maybe this is like really, really large values and you didn't want to do the scale, you don't have to. Let's see, function properties. That was kind of actually the quick entry, and this allows you to show some different things. Like for a calculus class, you could show the derivative. Let me maybe get rid of some of this. So maybe I'm dealing with this quadratic. Oh, I'm going to re-put those scales back in, or the axes, or the grid. If I wanted to graph the derivative of this, I could go under y equals. This is probably not, and under function properties, I could show the first derivative if I wanted to. It will usually show it as a different color. I could also show the second derivative. And you could choose what colors. Maybe I want this one to be red. I don't know. Which is kind of cool. If I didn't want, I'm going under function properties to show the first and second derivative, but maybe I had two functions. Maybe I wanted to draw in just a line. I could put those in here, and I think that there's some extra things I could show under function properties. Like if I click on this function right here, here's the color that I want to use, blue. If I click on this function, I think I can change it so that they are two different colors. Let's see. Yep. And that way you could have two different functions. This is just nice because you have all sorts of things for when you're teaching from these. You can make them how you'd like. And of course you could change the scale, etc. You can also do polars. So if you go back to grid and let's say you're putting in a polar, you could choose to graph it with this graph as well. And under function properties, I think I could do like r equals 3. And I could show that polar. Or if I wanted to, r equals 3 cosine of theta. Let's see. I think, and I could change it to radians. I don't know. I think I'm trying to remember what I must have to use. Oh yeah, I think I just type theta. I just type th and it knows I want theta. There it is. So for those of you who teach pre-calc, that way you can get those in there really easily. And again, you could pick if you want the rectangular grid, it will still graph that. I mean, it's just personal preference, right? What grid do you want to use? If you wanted to not show, if you just wanted that initial ray, you could choose to do that. And so when you're happy with it, when you've got what you've wanted, to graph, I don't know, whatever it is, I'll go back. Not where I'm doing a degree. Oh yeah, I've got this still on a funky one. All right, so once I've got what I like, to put it into the diagram, into Word, I just click this. And then I can, because I didn't do the inline one, I can enlarge that, I can move that, copy and paste it as much as I would like. All right, creating geometric diagrams. Maybe I'm wanting to create some shapes. I'm going to go this time to FX Draw and open that. Okay, under FX Draw, let me just move this just a bit. I can make all sorts of shapes. Let's say I want to make a circle. I could do that. I could change. If I click the pointer, I could click on the circle and I could change some things like edit properties. Maybe I would like to change some stuff. I could do that on here to change like how big the center mark is, etc. Maybe I want the center mark to look like that. You could see it changed the center mark. I could add in radii really easily here. I could make chords, or I could draw in a secant or a tangent. Now let's say I want that tangent to have arrows on the end of that. I could toggle to the arrow, and I'm going to click this. Sorry, I went too fast. If I click this, or if I right click on it, I can change how I want the symbols to look. Maybe I want arrows on each end. Now maybe I'm like, I don't like the size of those arrows. I'm going to right click again. I could make the size of those arrows maybe a little less obtrusive. Let's say I want to name some points. There's a couple ways. If I push this and maybe I want to name this point of tangency, I could just click and drag. Maybe I want to name the center. This will go in alphabetical order unless you tell it to do something different. I'm just clicking and dragging, and that makes that really easy. I didn't like where that one was placed, so I'll try again. Notice it skipped the letter that I had deleted off. And let's say I didn't like one of those letters. I'm going to go back to the pointer. I could click on that letter and say, I really want that to be a W. And that could go in there, which is really nice. If I wanted maybe one of these to be array, I could, again, edit the properties, and maybe I just want an ending arrow. And maybe I want to keep it the same size as before. I could do that. Let's say I draw in another radius, and now maybe I want to draw in an angle measurement. A quick way is to click this and to click it, and it will give me the angle measurement. And maybe I didn't want it to give me the angle measurement. Maybe I just wanted to draw like a congruence symbol. I can go ahead and click on this and decide how I want to mark that angle. Oops, actually I take that back. I'm going to grab the pointer and I'm going to right click on that. And maybe all I wanted actually was like a congruence symbol. Now this congruence symbol looks weird because it has arrows, but maybe I don't want the arrows. So maybe I'm going to mark that with a certain symbol, and I'm going to make some other another angle that's congruent to it. I'll draw in like a little vertical angle here. Now, because I last used that symbol, I think it might just pull it. Okay, and I want to make sure I'm correctly telling. I'm going to get rid of this secant. So you can click on things and just hit delete. Maybe I don't want that point anymore. But if I want to now mark this angle, I could do that. And again, if I'm like, oh, I didn't want the angle measurement, I wanted it to be a congruent symbol, then I can do that. I can actually take these symbols, and if I'm like, I wanted it farther away or whatever, I didn't like what I did there. Let me go back. Maybe I wanted to then have the angle measurement from this. I could do that. And that could allow kids then to find arc measurements, etc. Perhaps I don't want to deal with circles. Maybe I've decided I don't like any of this. I could go back to the pointer and I could just highlight all of that and delete it. If I want to make a rectangle, I could click on the rectangle shape and just drag and drop. Notice that if I mark these angles, since they're right angles, the computer's smart enough to know that. Now, if I wanted it to be the degree measure instead, I could right click and I could select degree measure. Oh no, I guess I can't. It knows that that's a right angle. If I don't want this to be a rectangle, maybe I wanted it to be a different shape. There's other ones. So I could make the rectangle angled, or I could make a parallelogram, a rhombus, a kite, or I could just make a different shape using a different one. So, but let's say I wanted it to be a rhombus. I could go ahead and just start drawing it. It'll finish drawing it for me. I could find out the measures of the angles really easily. If I wanted to change the slant of this, I can do that. These yellow ones can move. And notice how the angle measurements move with it. If I wanted to make it like longer or shorter, I might have to move on a different one. Well, let's say I move here and I don't like where this angle measurement is anymore. I could click on it and move it and go, okay, I really want it more like here. I could name points again by point and drag. If I don't like the letters, I could just right click on them. They start making some interesting ones at times. If I wanted to draw on the diagonals, I could do that. I could name the point easily where the diagonals meet. I could find the measure of one of those, or I could, oh yeah, I forgot rhombi, the diagonals are perpendicular, totally forgot that. I could also choose to draw on something else, like maybe I wanted there to be an algebraic expression for some of these, so maybe I didn't want that angle measurement. I could click here, this is my text box, draw a text box and start typing. Maybe I wanted this to say 4x degrees. There's my degree symbol. And then I can just take this box and put it where I want it. Maybe I want it right there. And I maybe don't want that size to be as big so that it doesn't interfere with other things I might draw. If I wanted to make tick marks maybe on side lengths, I could right click on a side length. And for the edge, I could choose, okay, I want this to have a certain click mark, and maybe I really wanted that tick mark to be really big. That's obnoxious. Or I'm like, no, I don't like that. I could shrink down that marking. That's really small. So you can play with things and decide what you like it to be at. You can add in, I don't know if you saw, like parallel markings. And it will automatically tell you which lines are parallel in the whole diagram, which is really, really nice. And if you don't want that and you just want it to be only on some of them, I guess I have to right click and tell them I don't want that anymore. I don't want the parallel ones. But let's say I did want parallel of only certain ones. It would only do for the side length that I want. Maybe I only wanted to have the parallels only drawn for these two. If I didn't like the direction of those arrows, I can change them and it'll switch the direction. Let's see. Also on, as an option, I could draw triangles, isosceles, all sorts of these. So like if I wanted to draw a right triangle, I could do that. I could mark the angle if I wanted to. If I wanted to draw a polygon, and maybe I wanted a regular one, and maybe I wanted to draw it by the sides, I draw one side. Now you might like, I don't want a pentagon. You can right click on it and change how many sides you want. Maybe I want an octagon. I can adjust the size of that by using the green. I can adjust the slant of it by using the orange, which is kind of cool. I can fill this diagram if I wanted to. I can fill, I think right here. No, maybe not. Let's see. That's paint. I think fill. Nope. I'll have to play with it and find out. Let's see. I think this moves things forwards and backwards. I'm not sure where the fill is. There is a way to fill within the shapes. Oh, I think it's right here if I want a solid fill. There we go. So I can choose what type of fill. That's no fill. That means no fill. I can make it solid, and then I can change the color. Make it really bright yellow. You can choose how you would like that to be. And you can even fill within some shapes and not others. So like if you're doing geometric probability, maybe within this octagon, you draw in, I don't know, a circle. Just gonna move it around. Oh, and if you don't like how things are going, click this, and then you can move things around a little bit more easier, and it will take it off of the grid. All right, so let's say I want to fill just the octagon, but not the circle. Oh, I think I clicked on the wrong one. So let me change my mind and not fill that one. But let's say I just want to fill the octagon only. I think I'm clicking the circle. Maybe I'll take my circle away for a minute. Okay, so maybe I'll fill this guy. Doing great. Trying again. There we go. And then I want to put this one back on there. Now what I'd have to do is I have to fill this circle with white or gray or something else. And then that way you can kind of get that area shaded between different shapes, and you can move things around so that it looks like it's an inscribed circle. I think there's also ways you can build the inscribed ones with some of the functions in here. And then again, if you wanted to, you could draw in some different radii or things like that. All right, so, and then let's say that I'm happy with everything that I've got, which maybe I'm not. Let me actually show you one or two other shapes you can do. You can do a polygon that's not regular if you wanted to just make something of your own unusual, even including a convex. You just have to go back to the starting point. Didn't do it right. Trying again. Sorry, it's been a while since I didn't teach geometry this year. Doing great. Maybe I won't try to make a convex one. Maybe double click. I don't know. There is a way. I'm sorry. Let's see. These, you can do some ellipses, parabolas, and you can actually like put in the equation for those. Same thing with an hyperbola. So that is kind of nice. I'll just make some random shape here. Okay, so let's say you're happy with it and you figured out how to do the shapes you wanted. You click this. It'll put it into your diagram. And again, you can adjust it and move it freely, which is really nice. If you want to take a coordinate system and put it into your drawing diagram, you can do that. So if I go to FX Draw.
No, I don't know. It's not Trish was on okay. I'm gonna meet with, are you okay to meet with Brock right now? Yeah.
And then if you want to add a coordinate system in, you could go right here. And this will add a coordinate system. Let's see. I guess I hit some. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, now see the little plus sign? You can just drag. This will tell how big you want it to be. Now this has a different setup than what I've had in the past, than what I did in the graphing section. It's not the same. So I'm going to right click on it. And if I wanted, I could adjust things. By the way, I forgot to show you this earlier. I can hit set as default, And in the future, anytime, I would now have it set up like this. Again, I can choose to do that differently if I wanted. I could say I don't want to show the scale, or I don't want to show the tick marks, or maybe I don't want the scale to be as big, or maybe I want the minor and major axes to be the same color. I could pick. Now I could also put in the equation here. And if I don't like it, again, notice how that's very, very tiny or very, very thin for the font. I could change the font. And I could hit default, and that way I wouldn't have to change it again. And there it is. Now I could do some other things, like I could add in a point. Maybe I wanted to add in a point for some reason. Maybe I wanted to name some points on this. I could do that. So if I wanted to then reference points on here, I could do that. So something else I could do is I could then create a shape in here that I want, maybe like a geometric shape, and put it on the grid. Let's see. Let me get rid of this equation. And I'll get rid of some of these points just by clicking them on them, hopefully.
We'll go over to the
Where?
across the way.
Oh, first. Gotcha.
And then I can get rid of those. I'm just clicking on them and hitting backspace or delete. Let's say I wanted to put a circle on here. I could do that. And that way I don't have to type in the equation of the circle. I could just do that quickly. And maybe I want to name some points on this circle. I could do that. Or if I wanted to maybe draw in a triangle, maybe I want students to find the perimeter of this triangle, I could do that. I could just draw it in that way instead of having to write the equations of each of those segments. And then I could, again, name them points if I wanted to. And if I drag something too far, you could just change to the pointer, click on it, and you can modify it. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry. I could shade things if I wanted to, so I could click on this and I could shade it. Oh, and you can also adjust the transparency, I believe, if you wanted to. I think I can click this to make it more transparent. If you want to kind of be able to see through the grid or see through the shape, but you still want it shaded. So that's pretty nice. There's also, oh, here's the easy way to flood. If I want to flood things, I could click that and then click the shape. I forgot that you could do that little paint fill. And again, you could change the color. And then you could choose to change, again, like how full that was, etc. And I think because I've got two shadings on there, it's a little bit annoyed with me. But then I could, again, just put this into my Word document. And I can change its size, I can move it, which is nice. Using clip art and diagrams. So let's say that I am in FX Draw. And maybe I wanted to use some clip art in here. So maybe I'm trying to use a coordinate system, and I wanted to say, like, this person's walking to the tree, and I wanted to put it on a coordinate system, or even if I didn't want to, I can select a gallery image. There's all sorts of images in here, like trees and cars and stuff like that. I guess I clicked the wrong one. There we go. And maybe I want this tree. I can go ahead and put this tree and just insert it. I can make it as big or as small as I want. I'm just dragging. And then I could take this tree and I could put it wherever I want, even on my grid, which is kind of cool. So maybe I wanted it at a certain point, and if I didn't like how it was looking, I could move it. Something else I can do with any shape is I can flip it over, or I can flip it vertically. I can flip it diagonally. I can also rotate shapes. I can pick them up and move them around and rotate. This one's a little harder to rotate. You can see that that's not listed on there. If I drew maybe just some random triangle, and I wanted to, if I clicked on it, I could also hit copy, Control V, and paste and make another, and then I could reflect it if we wanted to talk about reflections. I could rotate these as well. Oh, that's not rotating. I'm doing something with the rotating wrong. There is a way to rotate them. I'm not really sure why it's not liking me today. Let's say that you were looking in the clip art and you were looking for stuff, but you couldn't find anything that you wanted. All right, so maybe you're like, okay, I like this building, but I want to find a different building. And you know that you could find something you liked better, maybe on Google. Sorry, my computer doesn't like to do two things at once sometimes. And maybe I want to find like clip art of a house. And I could go to images and pick the one that I like. Maybe I like this one. So I'm going to right click and copy that image. And then I'm going to open back up my efofex. Maybe I decided I didn't want any of those. And I'm just going to make sure my pointer is on. I'm going to right click. It's thinking. Oh, I just hit Control V to paste it. And then I can move this shape. I can shrink it down. I could reflect it. I could put it into my diagram however I wanted. Hopefully you can see, like for word problems, things like that, that can be really useful. And so maybe I'm, moving from my house and I want to go camping. And I want to just pick one of these clip arts that I happen to like of showing that I'm camping. So I'll just copy this, Control C is what I'm doing there, or you can right click. And I'm going to right click and paste it, or Control V. And again, I can take this shape. Sorry, click on the right one. And I can shrink this down, maybe. There we go. And maybe I want to, oops, sorry. I lost my efofex. I'm totally confused. I went on Pinterest or something, so my computer's all confused. But hopefully you can see how you could use that in maybe finding, I don't know, maybe you're making a word problem and you wanted to do a little diagram, and then you can just add that in to your diagram. So something else that might be helpful, let me just put that back in there. Maybe I wanted to name something with an unusual way. By the way, I can add a point in on this if I wanted to maybe say, hey, this is at a certain point. I can add in a specific point by clicking that button. I can include the coordinates of that point. Oops. If I wanted to, I could use the text. Now, let's say in the text I wanted to write something that was a little more unique. Again, this was the thing for diagram. By the way, here's the symbols. There's some symbols in here for theta and pi and different symbols. But let's say that I wanted to maybe write some unique symbols in there. There's some other mathematical symbols in here that you can use in the text box. So, I mean, just depending on what you wanted to put in here, notice that you can put in the angle symbol. There's a ton that you can put in here. There's all of these different Greek letters. There's some operations. So maybe you wanted to talk about the distance formula in here. Maybe this is the square root of 3 squared plus 4 squared. Oops. And you wanted to put that into your diagram just to remind kids of how do you do the distance formula. or maybe I'm just going to right click on that. Maybe I wanted to put distance equals. And maybe I'm adding this into this. It's really easy to do all of those mathematical symbols within this diagram. And you can put clip art, you can put a coordinate system, you can put in shapes. When you shrink this, it'll shrink everything proportionally. Same thing when you move it around. Now, let's say that you save this document and then later on you want to make a version 2 of a test or something. I'm not sure what I did there. Let's say that you wanted to make something equivalent, but you wanted to make it different. You can right click and you can edit the efofex object. And maybe you just want this to look a little bit different for a version 2 of a test. You could easily just change things a little bit and not have to redo the whole formatting of your test. So I could say, okay, maybe I just want this to be a bit different. So I'll make that negative and maybe I'll change this to 2 or something like that. And now I've got a different version and I've changed it in 5 seconds instead of having to redo this all on CUDA or whatever. 'Cause you guys know some of the CUDA ones are great and some of them are not. And maybe I just wanted to change a couple values on this or change the way that this chord looked so that students weren't just mimicking. Maybe I want to make this a diameter now, and maybe I want to add in some different values. I could do that, again, just by editing it. Maybe I didn't want this to be an equilateral triangle anymore, so if I edit it, I could choose to make this isosceles or a right triangle. Probably the easiest thing to do would be to click on the triangle and maybe change the type of triangle to isosceles. Actually, I think you have to actually just delete the triangle. And then you could add in a different shape, or maybe you wanted it to be a rectangle or something this time in the problem. And then you can just change it. And so that's nice. And that way we can quickly modify documents but not have to keep everything exactly the same. So I hope that helped, and that is the end of this video.